Hi everybody and welcome to the Worms Rumble panel. I'm John Wilcox from Team 17 and I'm joined by a couple of members of the Rumble development team who are here to discuss all things, surprisingly enough, Worms Rumble. First of all, guys, can you introduce yourselves and explain your roles on the game?
So my name's Kevin Carthew. I'm the creative director here at Team 17, head up the design department. I don't necessarily work on the titles day to day full time. That's more the likes of Adam and the other team members will be doing such things. I'm more involved in getting projects off the ground, pitching projects, and then supporting development of the game throughout.
And I'm Adam Findlay. I'm the lead designer on Worms Rumble. So I'm working on the project kind of creatively day to day, looking after the design team on it and working with Kev, the creative director, to kind of keep the vision and the direction of the game going.
Fantastic, lovely stuff. Well, some viewers may have played Worms Rumble in the recently held closed beta on PC, but for those who haven't been able to take part in the game yet, Kev, how do you describe Worms Rumble?
So Worms Rumble, simply described, is a real-time version of Worms. I say simply described because things are never so simple. As most people will know, Worms is a really long-running series, has a very storied history, and real-time is a huge departure for the series. Worms is a turn-based strategy game. Worms Rumble isn't that. It's much more an action game. That means that the game plays very differently from usual entries in the Worms series. It's a lot more fast-paced. It's not to say that it doesn't have strategic elements in it. It does. But it's less like playing chess and it's more like playing an action game. It has many hallmarks of the series. So obviously that manifests itself mainly, I would say, in the character. The Worms characters are familiar to everybody. They bring a lot of the style and the tone of the humor to the series, a lot of the things and the elements that the brand is known for, a lot of things that are iconic to the Worms series have transferred across to Worms Rumble. So it is a real departure, but we think that there's a lot in it that will be familiar to long-time fans of the series. I think there's a lot for long-standing fans of the series to enjoy, but it is quite a different beast to what has gone before.
Okay, that's great. And at launch, the game's going to feature two modes, Deathmatch and Battle Royale. How many players can take part in each of the modes, the sort of chaos and the heat of battle, and how do the two modes differ?
So we've got the kind of the two modes at launch. We've got Deathmatch and we've got Battle Royale. The Battle Royale mode itself is actually kind of split into two sub modes. So we've got a solos version of it and we've got a squads version of it. You'll be able to play with up to 32 players in Deathmatch and Battle Royale solos, and it will be 30 players in Battle Royale squads, which is made up of 10 squads of 3. So we really wanted to have a kind of wide range of modes at launch. We wanted players to be able to play on their own or to be able to play with friends. And really, we've got a deathmatch mode in there, which is kind of like a nice introduction to the game. It's good for players kind of getting up to speed with, the game's mechanics and how the game plays. It's a lot more forgiving than Battle Royale. When you die, you respawn again. So you're able to actually play a full session without just getting defeated immediately. And we really see that as the kind of stepping stone mode before people move into the Battle Royale games, trying their hand at solos and then squads. And it was really important for us to have a mode that supported team play in there at launch, to allow people to invite their friends and party up, and kind of, use communication and strategy to try and be the last squad standing, really.
That's really great. I mean, I guess also Deathmatch and Battle Royale, in some regards, Deathmatch is perhaps the oldest online multiplayer or LAN multiplayer mode when it comes to action games, and Battle Royale is probably one of the youngest. Is that an indication of the game's widespread appeal? We'll be able to get younger gamers, new gamers in straight through to the more mature veterans like Kev.
It's nice to say so, John.
I think what we've really tried to do is almost build the real-time Worms game that will allow for a really broad selection of modes. So whilst we're launching with the kind of 3 modes that I've just described there, we will be looking at doing other modes in the future, doing those as updates. So it's really important to us that we didn't just kind of pigeonhole the game one way or another. We really wanted it to be real-time worms that can support all sorts of different play in there.
I think there's also something in what you said there, John, about I think you termed it as bringing it to a younger audience. I'd definitely be interested to see if we can bring this game to a slightly wider audience. And I feel that this game is maybe a little bit more accessible than some of the Worms games that have gone in the past. As we've said, Worms is a long-running series. Everybody knows that we've made quite a few turn-based versions of Worms. And as we've done that, obviously with each entry, we've innovated. The games have gotten a little bit bigger in some instances. They've gotten a little bit more complex. You think about the size of the arsenal that the Worms have access to. Each one of those weapons on its own merits sometimes controls differently. So there are a lot of rules and a lot of things to remember in Worms as it is today. You think about the complexity of games like WMD. And with this version of Worms, almost like being a spin-off or its own thing, that's allowed us to reset in a lot of ways and really focus on what's important with the core mechanics and really try and get to what works best for this game. So in some ways, because of that, it has naturally meant that I think that this game is perhaps more accessible than some of the Worms games that we've released in the past.
Right. And actually talking about, you mentioned weapons. I think they're a quintessential part of what makes a Worms game. I think, beyond the typical machine guns and shotguns and everything else that you'd find in other action games, exploding sheep, holy hand grenades and stuff like that are a key part of the franchise for the last 25 years or so. Can you talk us through about some of the weapons that we can expect to see in Worms Rumble, some favourites that are coming back in, and also what are your respective favourites as well?
Yeah, sure thing. So I think the process of designing the weapons for this game has been a really important thing to kind of consider how the weapons would work with this more action-based approach to the game, with it being real time, and it's a very fast-paced game. So I think what we wanted to do is we wanted to kind of streamline down that weapon set that you've maybe seen in previous Worms games, and really get a set of weapons that could offer different types of gameplay and strategy, but also make it so that it's easy for players to manage that. Previously, you'd bring up a big weapons panel like full of weapons. There just isn't time to do that in Worms Rumble. There's not that time to react. So what we did was we kind of looked at old and new ideas for weapons. So we obviously had to bring back some of the classic hallmark weapons of Worms, things like the holy hand grenade, other things that may have not been announced yet. But what we did was we kind of prototyped those. We did lots of play testing on them. We had usability sessions, external players, internal players. And we really kind of tried a lot of things out until we kind of boiled it down to this streamlined weapon set that we think kind of covers all kind of types of engagements, all instances, all types of fights within the levels that we've built. My favorite weapon? It's a good question.
Please don't say something simple like a shotgun, though. Come on, you can do better.
I'm not going to say shotgun. I'm quite a fan of the banana bomb. I like the banana bomb. It's iconic. It's funny, and it does a lot of damage, a lot of destruction.
Yeah. So far, actually, we haven't spoken about the map so far. We've seen in the closed beta, we've seen in the announcement trailer released earlier in the summer, Missile Mall, the shopping mall level. It's quite a sprawling level. There's air ducts in it, there's escalators, elevators, destructible objects, the car park, the shop fronts, and obviously a giant ballistic missile right in the heart of it. How do you go about crafting a Rumble level, Adam? And how does that compare to creating a previously typical Worms game, a turn-based Worms level, and how do you iterate upon that design?
Sure. So I think, just to give a bit of context, what we sort of wanted to do with the world in this Worms game was really set it at the Worms scale. So in previous games, we've kind of done both in the past, but more recently you'd seen Worms at a kind of sort of micro scale where the world around them was large and they're tiny. And what we wanted to do is we wanted to kind of take it back to, where are the worms from? Where do they live? Normally you see them out on the battlefields at war with each other. So we thought, well, you know, where do they go? What do they do when they're not doing that? So what they do is similar to what they do out on the battlefield, is blow each other up, but for fun. So Missile Mall was really the first kind of location that we set in this kind of Worms City. And what we wanted to do with these levels, we still wanted to get a lot of humor in there, but we almost wanted to get that kind of zany, like kind of wacky Worms spin on it. So that's why you see the kind of mall built on top of this giant missile silo, because that's the kind of thing that the Worms would do, right? In terms of building the levels themselves, they kind of start off on paper with a kind of high level concept. And that then moves into kind of blocking it out in engine. And that's when really the kind of play testing and the iteration start. So, you know, does it feel fun? Is it good to navigate around the level? Does it offer different types of engagement, long range, close range? Does it have scope for strategy and tactics in there? And how do all the game's weapons fit into that environment and work as well? And then what we do then is we kind of get art involved in the process, and then they'll help to concept the level. And then when we've play tested it a lot and we're kind of happy with where it is, it will start to get dressed and it will really start to come alive then when the kind of art and the audio and the animation go into it. I think the thing that probably differs the most to making a level like this, as to say a level in WMD, which I've made in the past, it's a lot more bespoke. It's a lot more kind of handcrafted, I think. In the previous entries with the kind of more destructible world, you almost don't have to consider all the different kind of routes and navigation and possibilities, because it's almost a little more sandboxy with the way that the level can develop over time. So this was designed much more like a sort of handcrafted arena for players to fight in.
And of course, there are destructible objects dotted and littered throughout the levels, as well as we've seen in the closed beta already. Now, Worms Rumble is coming to PlayStation consoles, it's coming to PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 5, as well as PC, with cross-play functionality. So there's that sort of cross-generational, as well as cross-platform functionality. How challenging is it to the sort of work that into a game, and how does it affect the creativity that goes into its development?
I think developmentally, there's a huge technical challenge that comes with implementing something like crossplay. Even if you just look at the number of games out there in the market that are doing it, there aren't that many. It can be difficult bringing different platform holders together in order to allow their platforms to be opened up and play against different users on different platforms. So there's a massive technical undertaking involved with it. There's all sorts of things that probably aren't visible to the average user, such as standards and requirements for platform holders. There's how we actually achieve it from a user interface point of view, because it's not something standard that comes out of the box. So we have to write all of that. And with writing all of that, we have to think about how usable it is, how accessible it is. The player may not be then matching up with their friends or forming parties in a way that they're used to doing. So all of that's a challenge. So yeah, the crossplay side of it is a huge technical undertaking. There's quite a lot of design involved. But then when it comes to developing for new platforms, I mean, it's always great developing for new platforms. It is undoubtedly a challenge, but it's a really interesting challenge, because you get to learn about cool things like, you know, the features of the new controller, the features that the new platform has from a back-end point of view. And then you've got to think about how you can implement all of those things meaningfully. Like, it has to make sense for your game as well. There's no point doing it if you don't feel that it adds to the experience. So it is a challenge, but it's an interesting challenge. It's a good challenge to have. It's a rewarding challenge, I would say.
No, I know that, Kev, I know I mentioned earlier on, I joked about, might have joked about your age earlier on, but, you know, this is not the first time you've moved into a next generation console cycle. You've been with Team 17 now for many years.
Over 2 decades, Joe.
Over 2 decades, about 22 years from
22 years, yeah.
So you worked, and we'll come to this in the Worms 25th panel, but you worked on Worms Armageddon, which I think a lot of people see as the sort of peak of Wormsdom, and you've worked through multiple installments of the series through to the new title with Rumble. Do you still get excited about new console cycles, and how does this one compare to previous ones?
Oh yeah, of course. I think anybody working in games or anybody who's interested in games, it's impossible not to. It's just always good to have new toys, right? New platforms, new hardware. It's always super exciting. I think it's especially exciting working at a game developer because there's a buzz around the place and everybody thinks about the potential and what these new platforms might bring. And then you start to get the dev kits in, so people get the first look at the hardware. What does the pad look like? What does the industrial design look like for the first time? And then that carries all the way through, even up until launch day. I can remember many launch periods, going back to say like the days of the PlayStation 2, where somebody might get the first import machine when imports were still a thing, and there'll be a buzz around the office. It'll be in an office somewhere. You can go look at it, play on the new games. Always incredibly exciting. I think both as a fan of games in general and as a game developer.
We've said earlier on in the panel, Kev, about it's very much a departure for the series, as we currently know it, the move from team-based strategy into a fast-paced, real-time action shooter. How did that sort of process come about? How did that decision come about?
So when we first started thinking about what the next Worms title would be, what form it would take, it actually wasn't that long since we developed Worms WMD. So I think Rumble probably the first rumbles of Worms Rumble probably started about 2 years ago. I didn't plan that. That's completely off the cuff.
Well done, look at that. What a pro.
That's the kind of dedication that you get.
Absolutely.
So it was probably about mid to early 2018 we first started talking about the title. So we were still about 2 years from the launch of WMD, and we put a huge effort into WMD. We felt that with WMD, we delivered an awful lot in terms of feature completeness for that design of a classic Worms title. It's an incredibly feature-rich game. It's a very robust game. It shares a lot of commonalities with Worms Armageddon. As you mentioned previously, John, Worms Armageddon has long been a fan favourite. Some of us saw WMD as almost being like a love letter to Worms Armageddon. And it was really difficult in a lot of ways for us to top that. We thought, what would we really do next? Like, where could we take it next? And allied to that also, I think that the classic Worms design does throw up some challenges for design. One of the challenges being, if you want to scale up, if you want to do like a massively multiplayer version of Worms, with it being a turn-based game, how would you actually achieve that? It probably wouldn't be an awful lot of fun, you waiting for 32 other players to take a turn after you taking the turn. You would want to be engaged with it.
Yeah, it would almost have to be like a second screen experience, right? You spend half the night just waiting for your turn to come around.
Exactly, yeah. So with Rumble, we thought there were a lot of benefits to it. Some of the benefits being around accessibility, some of them being around it being much quicker and much more immediate to get into a game and just get playing. So there are a lot of pluses for this sort of like general direction of design. What wasn't a plus was that we had the entire history of Worms to call on, and if we were making another classic game, we probably have a pretty good idea how we would go about it and what we would start doing. Not the case with Rumble. There are similarities, but essentially you can treat it as a separate game, a separate entry in the series. And we'd never made that before, and it was daunting and challenging, and we didn't know what it looked like. And so we set a small team working on it. We created a prototype, and we probably kicked that around for about 6 months. It was a super ambitious, very fully fledged prototype. It ran over a network. It wasn't 32 player. I think it was probably around 15 players. It started out as being a battle royale. Then we tried the deathmatch mode. It was quite touch and go for a while as to whether or not we thought we could achieve it. I can remember quite clearly The kicker being that we have a few offices with Team 17, and the prototype was developed in Wakefield. And we took it down to Nottingham, and we got it in front of the boss. We got it in front of Debbie, and we were saying, this is what we think it'd look like. This is a plan. We realise it's quite a departure, but we have made a working prototype. And we got all of the guys in the Nottingham office to play it, and it was completely unscripted. We just jumped into it. It was quite brave of us. It could have completely shot us in the foot. But I think it was really, Debbie got to see people playing it in the office, really engaging with it, really enjoying with it. A completely unrehearsed, unplanned presentation, but it went really well, and that showed us that there was a lot of potential in this. Still an awful lot of work to do, but the prototype really set us up and gave us confidence that this could be an exciting new direction for the series.
Brilliant. And Adam, it's one of the first, if not the first, games as a service title to come from Team 17. I know we're not talking about post-launch roadmaps and all that sort of stuff today, but that presents itself some really exciting opportunities, doesn't it, to support a game for months and years ahead. And what's that sort of been like?
It does, yeah. So like you said, this is the kind of first time we've ever tried to do this on a game, and with it being Worms, it's even more of an exciting challenge, I think. So like you said, we can't really go into the specifics yet, and we will be revealing stuff on the kind of run up to launch. But, we really put a focus on, we want players to have stuff to kind of work towards. We sort of showed some of it off in the beta. So there is a meta game there. You can level your worm up. You can unlock cool, increasingly fancy customization for them to really show off how good you are at the game. We had some challenges in the beta as well, so there'll be daily challenges there in the game, so things that players can work towards each day to get themselves even more cool rewards. But there'll also be kind of longer term things in there as well, so like weekly, monthly, maybe even annual kind of things that we can't quite go into the specifics of. But really, launch is only the beginning for Worms Rumble. We're going to be looking at, supporting it long after launch. We're going to be looking at, really listening to the community and kind of taking on board their feedback and using that to help shape the game in the future.
Okay, and that's about wraps up the Worms Rumble panel today. Thank you very much for joining us. Thanks to both Kev and Adam. Chaps, thank you very much. Best of luck with the rest of development. If you want more information on Worms Rumble or track its development, then you can follow it on Steam or via Twitter at WormsTeam17. Thank you very much for joining us. Bye.